sorry. But in any case, next up we have Teresa MacBain. She is the Communications, Public Relations Director for American Atheist. She's also been in several news stories. For those of you who don't know, she was the ex-minister that came out at the after the Reading Rally at the American Atheist Conference. Created a firestorm of news media events, and well, we're glad to have her here today, and so everyone please give her a warm welcome. Has anyone seen the laptop remote? There we go.
Well, good morning, and thank you for letting me come, and thank you, Brian, for introducing me. Although I'm not quite sure how I feel about someone with better hair than me introducing me. I've been trying for probably 3 or 4 years to get my hair to grow back out. I had a lapse in judgment and thought I really wanted short hair again, and well, you know, that lasts for a little while, and then you want to grow it back out. Ladies, guys, I know you're just sitting there going, oh my goodness, you know, this is ridiculous. Some of you are saying, just be happy you have hair. That's how my brother feels, who is about 6 years younger than I am. In his 20s, he lost his hair. And all us girls have nice, thick, beautiful heads of hair. And so he hates us. Yeah, he hates us. While they're finishing up with the technology issues, there we go, a little taller. Let me tell you a story that somewhat details my life and my journey. There's a story about a train engineer. I don't know if he was in Pennsylvania or not, but I know you guys have a lot of trains here. And he would go on his run every day, would come in and out of the yard. Nothing changes, everything stays the same. Goes to work, loads up the folks, takes them to their places, comes back, changes out the trains, goes again. Well, one particular day, he went out and he was coming back in, and there was a little boy that was sitting beside the train tracks. And he had a box that was full of puppies. Cutest little puppies you've ever seen. And he had a sign that said, free to a good home, Christian puppies. No kidding, this is a true story. I'm a preacher, I would never ever lie to you. Well, maybe I'm an ex-preacher now, so I might lie to you. I don't know, we'll see. So the guy comes up to him and he sees the puppies and he says, sir, don't you want a puppy? These are good puppies, they have great morals, they're Christian puppies. And the train engineer smiles and pats the little fellow on the head and says, no, son, I'm sorry, I don't need any puppies. So he goes on about his business. A few weeks pass, a month passes, the train engineer doesn't even think about the little boy or the puppies until another day, about 6 weeks down the road, the little boy is sitting beside the train tracks and he has the same little puppies in the box, same number, nobody's taken a puppy. This time he has a sign that says, puppies free to a good home. The word Christian is marked out and it says atheist next to it. So the train engineer scratches his head. He's like, wow, what is going on with this kid? What is going on with these puppies? And so he goes over and he asks the little boy, what's the difference? Why did they change? Why do you now have atheist on the sign with the puppies? And the little boy looked at him with all the sincerity in his heart and he said, well, their eyes were opened. I do realize this is an atheist and humanist conference. An atheist is simply, the word is just a statement of what we do not believe, and humanist is the way we choose to live our lives. At least in my case, that's the way I choose to label myself. Labels really don't have a lot of meaning to anyone except when we're trying to communicate our values to someone else. The values that do exist, even though Christians will say that they don't exist. So I think we're almost ready here. There's my name. My name is Teresa MacBain, in case you haven't figured that part out yet. Do you think we're good to go? I'm not clicking. I have to come up with another joke now, don't I? The technology isn't working. How's that? Well, let me just go ahead and start as they're getting the slides together. There's a term that I'm sure all of you have heard at some point in your life, a phenomenon that's known as a paradigm shift. You guys know what this is? Nod your head this way if you do. Nod your head that way if you don't, and I'll give you a science lesson. The only thing I have to warn you about is I have a degree in theology, so I'm not exactly sure because science and theology are foreign terms. They just don't have anything to do with each other. There we go. There, see, shift happens. That's the name of my talk. In 1962, a gentleman by the name of Thomas Kuhn coined this phrase, paradigm shift. A paradigm shift is actually a radical change from one way of thinking to another. Just like this little boy with his puppies. That was a pretty radical difference for him to mark that out on the sign and put a totally different term. The paradigm shift that I'm talking about and that relates to me and to my life is something that occurred over a long period of time that is a revolution, revolutionary. It's something that's transformational. It's actually a metamorphosis. Now, the religious community has taken this term, metamorphosis. I'm sure if you came out of religion, you know that this always is equated to the moment when you encounter Christ and you pray this prayer and He becomes your personal Savior, you're born again. Well, that's actually not a good description of what they're claiming happens inside of you. They're saying that you were dead and now you're alive. Well, a metamorphosis, a caterpillar doesn't die, right? You guys know science. You know it better than I do because I have a theology degree, correct? Got it. I even get this part though. What happens in a metamorphosis is little Mr. Caterpillar goes to sleep, takes a nap in this nice little blanket and wakes up and poof, he is a beautiful butterfly. Evolution at work, right? This is what happens in a paradigm shift. The state of being in one situation goes through a radical change and comes out on the other side in a hopefully more beautiful state. That's kind of what has happened to me. Exactly what has happened to me. But here's the thing about a paradigm shift. It just doesn't happen. It's driven by agents of change. So I want to share with you my story, a little bit of the chronology that has happened, but mostly I want to focus on those agents of change that pushed me to the place where I'm standing in front of you today, telling you about the shift that has happened in my life. And we've lost technology again. But that's okay, it's my life, I know what happened. Don't worry, you are in good hands. The only problem will be is Brian's going to be over there and he's going to be going, you're out of time, you're talking too much. My life began probably like yours began. Man and a woman met, they fell in love, they got married, and poof, here I am. I don't think it was a stork or it was a cabbage patch. I'm pretty sure my mom went to the hospital. The story goes that we grew up in northeast Alabama, which is tornado country. Apparently, the day I was born in the hospital, there was a tornado in the county where the hospital is. That should have been a message. That should have been some type of omen to my parents that this girl is going to be a little different. I don't think they caught on until the day I went to my dad and said, I don't believe anymore. But I was raised in a very strict Southern Baptist home. My father was a Baptist minister, which makes for interesting growing up time. Unlike a lot of preachers' kids that go wild, which was my two sisters, I was not like that. I have a picture here. Can you see it? Use your imagination, okay? Use your imagination. Little girl, 3 years old, went to Easter Sunday service. I couldn't wait because it was just the best day of the year. Went to Grandma's house, enjoyed a meal like we always did after Easter Sunday. I loved, even at 3 years old, everything that there was to do with God, with Jesus Christ, with religion. I mean, it was my passion at that age. Can you imagine a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old? I couldn't wait until I was old enough to actually read the Bible for myself. About the second grade, a man came to our church on a Sunday evening from the Gideons. Do you know who the Gideons are? Yeah, this means yes. This means no. The Gideons are the people that come and they place Bibles in the hotel room, which I noticed there wasn't one in my room. None in your room either, I guess. I wanted to bring it as a visual aid. Why didn't they put a Bible in my room? They also give them to prisoners. But back in 19-something, they would come and they would give them to children in churches. And after the service was over, he called all of us little kids up front and gave us a little red Gideon's New Testament. I thought I had, pardon the pun, died and gone to heaven. It was the best thing that I had ever been given. My own Bible, I could read, and I took that thing with me. I took it home and started reading it. I carried it to school, and anytime I had finished class early, I read that Bible. It was my prized possession. And I developed pretty quickly this idea that if I was in class and I knew you and I knew you didn't go to church or didn't go to the Baptist church, I was going to try to find a way to get some time with you to share what I knew from the Bible, to share this message of Jesus Christ, and to try and convert you and bring you to church, to my church, which was the right church. And can you believe that somebody who's in the 4th grade is doing that? But that was me. I carried that thing, I read that thing, I used it to try and witness to people for so many years that eventually it disintegrated. I absolutely wore it out, and there was no more Bible left. But that was okay because I graduated to a big girl Bible. In the 6th grade, my dad got, you don't want to hear all that story. All the point is I got this big girl Bible, and I had already developed study skills that probably rivaled a lot of people who were in Bible college. I went through that thing, I dug through that thing, I had notebooks, highlighters, markers, red pens for this subject, blue pens for this subject, green pens for this subject, so that I could get a thorough understanding of scriptures in the 6th grade. And why am I making a point about this? Why am I going on and on and on? Am I trying to pat myself on the back? No. One of the things that you probably have heard, and I hear it every day on my Facebook page, you were never really a true Christian. No. If I wasn't a true Christian, then there wasn't one that existed. I was so into it, and it wasn't forced. I absolutely loved it. I adored it. It was during this period of studying and digging and trying to really learn the Bible and to grow that I came across a section in the Bible, the book of 1 Corinthians, in the 7th or 8th grade, middle school. Paul writes in the book of 1 Corinthians 2 separate things that had never struck me as odd before, but one day it just kind of jumped off the page at me. Now, I'm a woman, in case you haven't noticed. I am a woman, and I felt like God had called me to do something special in my life. That's kind of like the high holy grail for anybody who's a Christian, is that God would call you. And so I felt this way. But there was an issue with the faith that I was raised in and I believed. It wasn't very friendly toward women. Women were allowed to sing in the choir. Women were allowed to keep the nursery. Women were allowed, in our church at least, to teach children 6th grade and below. So there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity for me as serving in ministry, serving in music, or doing anything that I felt like I was called to do. So what did I do? I started reading passages in the scripture, trying to figure out exactly what was going on there. And this was one of those places. So in 1 Corinthians, Paul says 2 things. And they're 2 chapters apart, by the way. So it's not like 1st chapter, 12th chapter, 13th chapter. He said the first one, which I'm sure you've probably heard before, women keep silent in church. If you've got a question, go home and ask your husband. Now, that's an encouraging thing to hear, isn't it, ladies? So be quiet while you're here, all right? I'm a preacher. Don't say anything. Well, Paul goes on in 2 chapters just before that, and he says, when a woman prays or prophesies in church with her head uncovered, she dishonors her head. If I'm not mistaken, praying involves talking, and prophesying involves talking. So Paul has just said in these 2 different places, he has said, keep your mouth shut. Open your mouth, but make sure you wear a hat. Right? I was confused. I didn't know which one was right. I didn't know which one to believe. So I went to my dad, and I asked him, oh, look at these guys. They've got it right there for me. So this is magic. That's a miracle. Yay! I worship you. Please don't. Dude, I wish somebody would worship me. No, seriously, no. Where was I? Oh, yeah. I'm confused. It's like Saturday Night Live now when the host actually gets tickled at their own joke. I went to my dad and I laid my case out before him just like I laid it out for you. And I asked him, I said, Dad, which one is it? Which one is true? They both can't be true. He sits there for a minute. He thinks and he says, Teresa, are you confused? Well, duh. Yeah, of course I'm confused. And he takes a classic technique and he says, well, the Bible says that God is not the author of confusion. So if you're experiencing confusion, it's not from God. It's from the enemy who's trying to cloud your mind and destroy your faith. And then he goes on to say the Bible teaches us that God's ways are higher than our ways and God's thoughts are higher than our thoughts. So you have to have faith. The Bible also says that it is by faith that the patriarchs obtained a good report. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Noah, all those guys. They obtained a good report. So if you want to be pleasing to God, then you have to put away those doubts and employ faith in your life. So what does this mean to me? Doubt equals lack of faith equals sin. Another question I have been asked from within the atheist community, mostly humanist, atheist, agnostic, free thinkers, how could you stay sucked in for so long? There's your answer right there. When you were in the 7th, 8th grade, was it 12 or 13 years old, and you learn a lesson that the questioning, the natural process of questioning and inquisitiveness that exists within our brains is sin, and if you are a Christian and you truly are a Christian, sin is the last thing you want in your life, right? You want to be pleasing before God. You want to obtain a good report. You want, as Revelation says, when you stand before God, he says, well done, my good and faithful servant. That means that sin has to be put away. And in order to do that, the doubts have to go. So I banish them to a dungeon. And my solution to this whole thing is to just work harder. If I were only a better Christian, if I were only more mature, if I only understood a little bit better, then my faith would be stronger and I wouldn't sin by questioning my faith. Many of you have probably experienced this. You may have friends who are going through it right now. This is a lot of the reason why they can't seem to see through the fog is because they're not allowed. And it really does imprint on you. It is an indoctrination. I mean, there's no two ways about it. So I moved from this point. Don't you love me there? Still feeling I've been called by God. Still looking at these scriptures. I've not yet convinced myself that the Baptists are wrong and women can be in ministry. But I did convince myself that I could go to the prisons, which was allowed, and I could go to nursing homes. And so I did. You can see here a copy of a picture of prisons. I went on Saturday for 4 years at 6:30 in the morning to a women's facility and preached for 4 years because they would let me go and preach. And I really did enjoy it. I mean, my heart has always been to teach people the truth and to help them. And that was a perfect opportunity. Most Sundays you'd find me 3, 4, 5 times a day going from one nursing home to the other, preaching to the residents, loving on them, and praying with them. I mean, I thought that I was actually obtaining that wonderful place of being called by God. Still wasn't allowed to be ordained, still couldn't stand behind a microphone on a pulpit or a podium, not yet. But my faith was progressing, or so I thought, becoming more and more liberal all the time, which was leading me to the Methodist Church, which I'll get to in one moment. Before I do, let's take a break to laugh again, because I love to laugh. And atheists are allowed to laugh. And like in church, when I would say a joke and I would get crickets, you guys actually laugh at my jokes, so thank you very much. You see this picture in the center? Can you tell what is there? It's a little bit dark. Let me tell you a story. I'm a pastor at a church. And I have this great sermon that I'm about to preach about how people are led astray, which could probably be how atheists lead Christians astray. I don't know. Anyway, that's another subject altogether. I'm going to talk about this passage of scripture that says, guard your heart with all due diligence because out of it flow the issues of life. Again, that reinforces that thought of don't think outside the box. You've got to stay pure within your heart. As I'm walking out the door, I have this wonderful idea for an illustration. And I grab the dog collar and the leash. During the middle of the sermon, I call my husband up and say, let me just illustrate this leading away idea to you. And I put the dog collar on my husband. and I click the leash to it. See, you know, I didn't know. I'm telling you the truth, I did not know. I click it onto his collar and start leading him around the front of the church. It's true. Now that one is true. The puppy story is not true. I'll own up to that one, but this is true. I had no idea why after church the chairman of the board called and wanted to have a conversation with me. Like, what? What did I do? And I asked my husband and he explained it to me. Oh my goodness, I was mortified. I never brought whips or chains or anything else to church. I mean, so now, after we have paused for just a moment of laughter, making fun of me, I met someone who is in the Methodist Church, a female, who is actually going to be a pastor. For one, I couldn't believe, excuse me again, I don't know what's my problem. I couldn't believe that the Methodists were going to let this woman become a pastor. But she and I became fast friends, and she gave me a book on John Wesley, who happens to be the founder of Methodism. I read the book with great excitement because Mr. Wesley had a totally different view of religion and theology. One of the first things that he said that really said something to me was this statement, probably his most famous quote. He said, "In the essentials, unity. In the non-essentials, liberty. And in all things, charity." So what does this mean to a person who has put doubts and questions away forever and ever and ever? It means that in the essential doctrines and teachings, which are basically the Apostles' Creed, you know, God the Father, Jesus Christ His Son, Holy Spirit, salvation by grace, you know, those basic core tenets, I have to hold to those, but everything else is free. It's open. It's a field day for me to start pulling those things back out of the back of my mind where they've been banished to and dealing with them in an open and honest way. Now, I really felt like this was going to lead me to the place to where I would be such a strong Christian and so mature and be able to be a pastor that could answer questions for people who had gone through a period of questioning like I had. It didn't quite turn out that way, which I'm glad for. But in the essentials, unity. In the non-essentials, liberty. And in all things, charity. This was just the first piece to it. Wesley also had a quote where he said, "Though we may not all think alike, may we not all love alike." Well, that was kind of the foundation for what I was doing as a pastor. I loved people. I loved helping people. I loved helping them find the truth. So here, Wesley has absolutely given me permission to think. And this was the beginning of the end for me. I started digging, looking everywhere I could find for answers to these questions that I'd held on to for so long. The Bible was the very first place. And this part of it took me a very, very long time to come to terms with. All those questions from years past had to be dealt with. So I literally sat down day after day with a Bible and notepad, drew a line down the middle, wrote contradictory scriptures next to each other, and started looking anywhere I could find to find some answers to it. It wasn't very long once I started doing that I moved to the place to where the Bible was no longer 100% true, factual, accurate, that it was more of a guidebook that had good parts and had bad parts that nobody could explain to me. So I did away with the bad parts and held on to the good parts. I actually called myself at this point, some days I called myself a Christian agnostic. Now, I don't know what that means. I made it up, but I think that's about where I was at in my journey. Now, I was dealing with this. There are a couple more phases, and you have to remember, all of these overlap each other in some way, but just for sake of being a little bit more clear, I'm going to deal with them one at a time. So during this time, the next piece that pops up and I have to deal with is this issue of hell. I never really thought of it. It never dawned on me that if you were not a Christian and I was, that you were going to burn in hell. It never dawned on me what that actually meant. And as I'm moving my way through this process and beginning to see outside the fog, I realize what that means. That means extreme torture forever and forever and forever, which I now understand and did then. That is a very, very, very long time. I started thinking about my own life. I'm a human being according to the scriptures. I'm frail. I'm nothing but really dust. I don't have even the intelligence to understand the scriptures according to the Bible. And yet, as a parent of two sons who gave me some quite interesting moments in my parenting, never once did I consider taking them out in the yard, building a bonfire around them and setting them on fire. Never once. Never once. So if I, as this weak and frail human being and human parent that is prone to fail, wouldn't do that, then why would a perfect and loving God do that to someone just because they couldn't figure it out in 60 or 70 years? Hell had to go. Couldn't believe in it anymore. It had to be a part of my past, along with the Bible. The next one was religion, and these two really layered on top of each other. I looked around and had friends that were of other religious faiths, and again began to think more clearly and logically and thought, wow, you're Hindu because you were raised in India with parents who believed that way. I was a Baptist Christian because I was raised in the deep South and the backwoods of Alabama. You know, another person is a Muslim because they're Middle Eastern and their parents were Muslims. So obviously we can't all be right. We can't all say, I'm right, you're wrong. There has to be this thread that runs through all religions, and the thread is this. Equally valid, none of them really have a handle on the truth. They're all man-made, but we're all seeking God, so it's okay. And my path happens to be Christianity, and your path happens to be Islam, and your path happens to be Buddhism or whatever. So I embraced that thought and theology for about a week. Honest, yeah, just about a week. Because the next issue that I was dealing with threw all that in the trash. This word is theodicy. For those of you who don't have a theology degree, this isn't the idiocy of theology. You guys, don't make me laugh. I gotta get through this before I get in trouble. This is how religious people, generally religious people, try to deal with the issue of evil that exists in the world. You can't deny, I mean, no matter whether you're religious or you're not religious, everybody has to agree that there are horrible things that happen on this planet to human beings, correct? We all agree on that one. Your head goes this way. Yeah, everybody's head should be going that way. Well, religious people try to explain these things. They try to get a handle not only on things like Hurricane Katrina that has devastated an area of our country and people are still trying to recover from it, not only from things like the tsunami or the earthquake in Haiti, but things like the Old Testament where God commits genocide, or the Old Testament where after this committing of genocide, God tells the general, the king of the time, say, okay, you destroy everything, but the unmarried women and the young girls keep for yourselves. What are you going to do when you keep them for yourselves? All right, so this is G-rated. We won't go any further with that. But theodicy is the attempt to answer those questions. The questions that personally and honestly, as a pastor, I hope nobody would ever ask me because I knew I didn't have any answers. How can you answer that? How can you answer it when a parent has a child that's born with some type of disease or some type of deformity, and they want to know, how did God do this to me? I've been faithful, I've given my life. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. I don't have to explain it any more than that to you. So I began to really dig into this, and again, I'm going back to the scriptures and trying to find an answer. And I'm reading other books and other things that people have said about it, and there are no answers. And I stepped outside the line just a little bit and encountered this writer from long, long ago in a galaxy far, far away by the name of Epicurus. He said, is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he is not all-powerful or omnipotent. Is he able but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then where does evil come from? Obviously it had to come from him. And then the final statement is the one on this day. This was a pivotal moment. Is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God? Now this day I remember, and it's only been a little over a year ago, I remember saying, all four of those things are false, and I cannot put any stock in any of them any longer. Not the Bible, not the theology or the doctrine of hell, not that religion is just man's attempt to connect with this deity, and not this issue of trying to find an answer to theodicy. The answer is, if that is a representation of what this loving God is, then it's a contradictory statement, and I can't put any faith in it any longer. someone who would absolutely destroy me just because I keep messing up with my questions, just because I haven't figured it out, because there are millions upon millions, maybe billions, I don't know the numbers. Again, I have a theology degree, not a math degree. How could this entity sentence us to that kind of reality in our lives? Why call him God? Now, I had lived my life in this way. And if you were formerly religious, you probably did too. This is my Christian bubble. Inside, you see me, I'm walking around this world, but I am so well protected. So the bubble is like, this is how it works. Christianity, and that's the only one I can speak from because that's what I lived. Christianity encourages you to put this bubble around your life. And inside the bubble are the allowable things. And outside the bubble are the things that you have to avoid because it's going to destroy your faith. Now, of course, the question is, well, if it's going to destroy my faith wasn't very strong, but we're not going to go there. Inside the bubble are things that are like Christian books. You can only read Christian books. You can only watch Christian TV shows or Christian movies or movies that focus on the family movie reviewer approves for you and your family. You can only listen to Christian music. You have Christian friends. You go to Christian events. I mean, everything is surrounding your religious life and your Christian life. And I really embraced it. I mean, I didn't want my faith to be destroyed by these things that were outside my bubble. But after I went through my little 4 steps and had come to that point of why I called him God, I saw a little crack. I read my first book that was not a Christian book. I mean, can you believe it? It was Bart Ehrman, and I actually read pretty much all of his books, trying to get a handle on this Bible issue. I mean, that's what I've been trained in. That's what I have lived. That's what I have put every piece of me, I have invested it in this book. And so Bart Ehrman, if you've not read his books, I'm sure you all have, he really deals with it in a way that connected with me because he had the same kind of background in theology. And I could connect and understand what he was saying. And I felt like, I mean, this was just one of the greatest gifts that I had ever been given. Like that little red New Testament I had way back when I was a kid, this was a key to unlocking the doors that I had kept shut for so long. Now I moved from Ehrman to Richard Carrier, where he deals with Bayes' theorem, and I'm still not sure I understand all of that. But he also deals with the issue of the historicity of Christ. Now, I'm not going to stand up here and say that I know the answer to that because I'm not an archaeologist, nor a mathematician, nor a scientist, so we've established those facts. But he really pulled into this whole thing that's going on in my head, some good solid facts that I could think about and that I could continue to work through as I'm getting up to the point to where I just chunk it all and walk away from it. I realized also at this time that I grew up in a very deeply religious southern town, that science was more creationism and intelligent design, that I went to a Christian college, a Bible college, where we didn't even deal with the issue of evolution. And then really didn't even think about it. Darwin was that nutcase, that wrote a theory, and it's just a theory, and the scripture points to creation as being a fact. So at this point, I knew that I had to go back and I had to get a little bit of understanding if I wanted to understand not just the scriptural side of it, not just the theologies and the doctrines that were in question, but I wanted to understand the Big Bang. I wanted to understand as much as I could the scientific aspect of it. So I reread all of those books, or read for the first time some that I should have read as a child. At this point, again, I'm ready to say that I'm not a believer, but I'm not ready to say it. Now, does that make any sense to you? Yeah. I don't want to say it. That's probably a better way to put it. I don't want it to be true. And it's so weird for me looking back. So one night, I'm kind of desperate. I Google pastors who feel they've lost their faith. And guess what? Dan Barker pops up. He'll be here later at some point. And his book is right there, Godless. I downloaded it on my Kindle and read it within just a couple of hours. I mean, I just couldn't put it down. There was a contact at the end of the book, and of course you have to remember, I didn't know who Dan Barker was. I mean, he was just some guy like me who had questioned his faith, lost it, and walked away. So I sent a message to Dan, and lo and behold, he called me back. and we had a long conversation. He shared his story, I shared my story, never giving him my real name. I just couldn't trust him because I didn't know who Dan Barker was. And he told me about a group that had just been formed called the Clergy Project. There were about 50 folks that were involved, and he invited me to be a part of it. Now, the Clergy Project, if you've not heard of it, is an online community. It's like a support group for pastors who have lost their faith, who are either agnostic or atheists. They have no belief in the supernatural any longer. And for me, it was absolutely the last piece that was necessary for me to start thinking about coming out and to acknowledge that I was an agnostic at that point. One of the folks that was on the Clergy Project recommended one last book, the last nail in my coffin, The God Delusion. I read that book, no, not in 2 hours. I had to read it and reread it and think about it and read it. I didn't pray over it, but I did read it. I'm just being honest with you guys, you know. As soon as I finished reading Dawkins' book, I typed online, I'm an atheist, and I have been for some time. I don't believe in a God at all. These were the steps that led me to that point. And it began with me reaching very gently my little hand outside of the bubble. It's kind of like Stargate. You guys ever watch Stargate? Yeah? You like that? I love the Stargate. Such a geeky little nerd. I mean, it should have been obvious. Anyway, that's another story altogether. It's like Stargate. When they first are encountering the Stargate, and there's that little Ripley wave thingy that goes on there, and they just gently put their little hand through. That was me with my bubble. I needed to go into another dimension, but I wasn't prepared. This paradigm shift had been building for a long time, and that was the final piece for me. That actually happened, I'm trying to remember when I think it was probably December of last year, so it hasn't been very long ago. Now looking back again, I realized that I had been in this position for a long time, and my faith had been gone for quite some time. In March, I got an opportunity out of the blue to go to the Reason Rally and to go to the American Atheist Convention. And through a very strange set of circumstances, which God had nothing to do with, by the way, I was invited to go up on the stage and to share my story and to officially come out to the crowd. I prepared my notes, I was ready. You know, I always like to be professional and I have a joke here and I have some points here and then I'm going to tie it up and end it and it's going to be great. And I got up there in front of the group and I looked out over the crowd and some of your faces were there and I saw people, just people, average, ordinary people with faces like mine, with just the same struggles on a daily basis that I struggle with. And I was overcome by all the times, beginning when I was a little girl with my red New Testament, that I was forceful, that I believed that you were wrong and that I was right and I had to convince you otherwise. And it was in that moment that I realized the only thing I could do was just apologize for it. And you will not believe the response. Well, if you were there, you would. This embrace, this picture somebody took, I don't even know who took it, of Dave Silverman walking up and giving me the best big brother hug I think I've ever had. The entire crowd is symbolized in this hug because the free thought community that was present there and from that point forward has done nothing but embrace me. Now, the aftermath of this has been quite difficult. News has portrayed me as a villain. Just to borrow the word that our good mayor said this morning, I have been demonized. The friends and family, my husband and sons are okay. Everything's good. Everything's cool, even though my husband is still a believer. But everybody else, with the exception of one couple, is gone. I mean, just gone in a moment. They don't want anything to do with me. You know, can't be around their kids. What am I going to do with their kids? Eat their babies? I don't know. At that point, I didn't know atheists ate babies. Now I've been told they taste like chicken. No. I'm serious. Honestly, I don't do that, and this is being videotaped, so disclaimer, it's just a joke. They were laughing at me. You have experienced that as well. I'm not the only one who has been shunned, who's had the door slammed in their face, who's had emails and phone calls and voicemail messages that say, I can't wait to see you in hell and watch the flesh burn off your body. I mean, you have experienced that. I don't for a minute think I'm the only one. But out of your experience, you reached out to me to say, I'm here for you, and it gets better. And so for that, I thank you. I moved from this point into a new life, new friends, new city. I moved from the South to New Jersey. Can you believe that? They don't have grits or mayonnaise or sweet tea. Somebody please help me. Do you have that in Pennsylvania?
We do at my house.
Sweet tea. Come to your house. Okay, after the talk. New job. I'm now working for American Atheists, as Brian said, as the public relations director, which, and get this, I was in church work all my life for 44 years. Now I work for the American Atheists, who by some are, they're a little bit controversial. Just a little bit. It's the best place I've ever worked. They treat me more fairly than any other place I have ever worked in my life. And I am not exaggerating. My dad, right when I came to work for American Atheists, my dad was in pretty bad health. And make a long story short, he passed away a month ago. When I got the call, I was at the office and my sister said, the doctor has called us in. You need to get here as soon as you possibly can. I went in and told the folks I work with, immediately they said, get your stuff together. Go home, pack your bag, and get out of here. Don't worry about a thing. We will take care of everything. And they didn't care that I had only been there for about a month and a half. And a lot of places you don't have leave time by that point, but none of that mattered. They took care of me. And that is something, that's an organization I can be proud to be a part of. And you should be as well, because we're all together in this. We're all together in the free thought community. One last thought, and then I'm going to finish up, and you have just a few minutes you can ask me a question. Oh yeah, I'm doing good. 5 minutes left. I'm not anything special at all. Really, I'm not. Sometimes I tell good jokes, sometimes I don't. I'm just an average person like you. I have hang-ups, I have bad habits, I have secrets I don't want you to know about, and you have secrets that I really don't want to know about too. We're just people, but I have a voice, and you have a voice as well. And my personal opinion as we finish this thing up is it's time that we all use our voice to stand up, to stand out, and speak out. That's how we make shift happen. Thank you. Now, before we have the question time, I want to take 1 more minute. I promise this will just be 1 minute of your time. As I said, on public relations, you're going to time me. I saw that. You need to get away from. I got good eyes. I got my eyes on you. I'm Public Relations Director for American Atheists. We are knee-deep in the middle of planning for our convention coming up in Austin, Texas next year, which is also the 50th anniversary of American Atheists. And so, once we're queued up here, if we get it together, I'd like to show you, this is brand new, it's only been seen one time on Atheist Experience in Austin last year when I was out there. Seth Andrews, you guys know Seth? You guys know him from the Thinking Atheist? We hired him to put together this little video. It's on my flash drive. No? Oh no, man, y'all are going to see all my files. This is not good. All right, close your eyes until it's ready. Everybody close your eyes. No, that's it. There's nothing on there that you can't see. MacBain down to the bottom. Yep, it's on that one. And it should be right there, AACon 2013 promo. Either one. All right, drum roll. Somebody play the drums. Hey, y'all are pretty good. All right, I'll hush now.
Someone once very aptly said, where faith begins, science ends.
In every single one of the 50 states in this country, the fastest growing religious affiliation is none.
Congress shall make no law
respecting an establishment of religion.
Real data showing the rise in religion in countries like us positively correlate with a lower quality of life.
The problems of our world can only be solved with knowledge and self-understanding. And only science can teach us those things.
Just a couple minutes. There's nobody here to stop me, so this is pretty cool. Yeah, if you want to register for the convention, this is the 50th anniversary, my little infomercial for 2 seconds. We're taking registrations now, so go ahead and get your ticket if you're interested before they sell out. And the hotel information is back there as well. We've got a great weekend planned for you. So, I think I have maybe, do I have time, Brian? Here's my timer.
You got now 7 minutes.
7 minutes. So if you got a question, come on down.
From your story, it sounds as though you feel the free-thinking, non-belief community is more welcoming than the religious community. Why doesn't the non-belief community do a better job of communicating that to the public?
Communicating the fact that they're not welcoming or being more welcoming?
That they're more welcoming.
Okay, all right. And that's a really tough one because I'm trying to speak for a large group of people. And I'm painting this with a very broad stroke based upon my experience, especially upon my experience of coming out. One thing I know is this, that the religious community has to exist inside the bubble in order to continue to maintain its bubble. And it has to encourage everybody that's its member or its adherent to stay inside that bubble, or they lose everybody. I mean, that's what happened to me. So I think that's probably why. If you're willing to come in and you're willing to play by the rules and you're willing to conform, then you feel welcomed. But the welcome is not the reality, because once you become different in any way, they remove it. You know, it's very conditional. I think that'd probably be the best word for it. Someone else have a question?
But why don't we do a better job of communicating that? That was the
you know, I think we do, and I think we're beginning to. I think the free thought community has been so focused on here's the science, here's the contradictions, here's the why can't you see it? But I think we're now beginning to shift and see that we need to communicate not only that we have science, we have math on our side, we have history, we have archaeology, we have all of these facts. I think we're now beginning to see a little bit of a shift where the stories are coming into play. And this relational aspect is coming into play. Now, whether we're going to get any news coverage for that, I don't know, you know. But that doesn't mean that we need to stop saying it. Eventually, if we keep standing out and speaking out, especially about this community component, then they won't be able to ignore us anymore. Especially when we do. I mean, and the mayor said it correctly, even though, you know, we disagreed. The thing that we have to be united on is humanity. And that's why I love being a humanist, because the humanist part of me sees the need to reach out and to care for people. I mean, use a Christian word, minister. That's what we do. Even though we don't associate with that term. We reach out, we give people a hand up, we try to solve their problems, not trusting in somebody somewhere far, far away, but knowing that the only solution to humanity's problems is when we reach out and we take an active part in our communities and in those relationships. Somebody else? Yes, sir.
Hi. I'd just like to add that at 3:30, we're going to be having a panel that will discuss that very question of communication. And Teresa has agreed to be a part of that, so at 3:30, maybe you'll get the answer that you're looking for. Thanks.
Maybe. Not only can you add that I'm not a mathematician or a scientist or an archaeologist or a historian, I'm also not a politician.
But you are a communicator.
Yeah, I am a communicator. I like to talk, that's what that means. Yes, sir.
I have a quick question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, you mentioned at the end of your talk, and it's a question I ask a lot, is why do you think devout believers have such a violent reaction to non-believers? You come from that place, and you mentioned it, the emails and things and friends that left you, and it's something that has confounded me for many years. Why do devout believers have such a violent reaction? And it really is at times violent.
Yeah, it is violent. I agree.
To our non-belief.
Yeah, I've had death threats, so yeah, it's violent. I think one of the things is they feel betrayed. You were one of us, and you've gone out from us. So one of it is they feel betrayed. The second piece is that their own faith, their own sacred text tells them that that's the response they're supposed to have. And then finally, I think they feel threatened. I know for me, when I would react that way, somewhere looking back, hindsight's 20/20, I knew somewhere deep down inside that I didn't have the answer, and that answer was at least plausible. And so that's very, very threatening, because if you give in to that, it undermines everything. And I'm a living testament to that. So I think those are probably the three things that I would point to that would cause that. Now, is there an excuse for it? No, there's no excuse.
Yeah, I have read on comments on Christian websites where these people don't believe that the people in this room have the right to live.
Exactly. Oh yeah.
Especially live in this country.
Yeah, and some of them would be happy to send you on to your final destination, whatever that may be. That, which of course to them is hell. So yeah, that's a very good question. Very good question. Yes, sir. I think this is the last one we can take. Yeah. Okay.
This is sort of the other side of the coin type of question. You say you're average, but obviously you're not compared to where you came from, because not very many people would make that journey. Why do you think so many Christians have trouble pursuing the truth to the extent that you've pursued it?
And I think it's just because it's the nature of the beast. There is so much isolation and sheltering. I mean, remember the picture I showed you of the dog collar on my husband? That's a perfect example of the sheltering that goes on and the protective nature. Religions really do circle the wagons, and they try to protect. They want to get you when you're young. There was a statistic some years ago, and I can't quote it exactly, but there's a certain percentage that's, I believe, a little over half, that if you can get a person when they are a child to become a believer in whatever religion that you follow, you've got them for life. It's hard to break out of it. Why did I don't really know, except for the fact that those questions wouldn't be silenced. Besides that, why do people stay locked in it? Well, for the very reasons we talked about. It's just indoctrinated. It's built upon and built upon and reaffirmed and reaffirmed and reaffirmed and reaffirmed. And again, you're not allowed to think outside the lines. So that's just, that's my opinion. I think that's it. Is that it? Okay. What? Well, no, because I can't even say my name in 1 minute. So I'll just go ahead and end here. I'll be happy to talk. If you didn't get a chance to ask your question, I'll be out at the table probably for the rest of the day, and I'd be happy to have a conversation with you. So thank you again for letting me come. Thank you, Brian, for inviting me.